going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review, and this is our sometimes weekly, but recently twice weekly show, where we review the Magic stories. And this week we are back with more Streets of New Capenna stories, but this time with our first side story. In side story number 1, The Contract Breaker, by Tobias S. Buckle. My quick review at the top of this one is, I think the idea of this story is really cool. I think the execution of this story was a little poor.
Okay. I thought it was fine. That's kind of it.
Fair enough. So if those glowing reviews have you wanting to go check out the story for yourself, the top link in the description down below will take you to this story so that you can read it for yourself or remind yourself of it if you have read it previously, if that's something that you want to do. Otherwise, we'll do our best to give you the gist of it, but you let us know your thoughts about anything that we talk about in the comment section down below. That is what it is for. Keep the conversation going. Before we get to the full review itself, hi. Welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget, while you are here, if you're enjoying the things that we do here at any of these Geek for All family of channels that we have, because we have other channels linked down in the description below as well, don't forget, wherever you are with Geek for All, to subscribe and ring that bell so that you get notifications whenever any of our videos come out, or if you're on this channel and you ring the bell, you'll get notifications whenever we go live as well. Because we do so every Monday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this channel. Mondays, if you're a fan of Magic the Gathering, we play MTG Arena. It is almost always limited, sealed, draft, etc. But we sometimes, occasionally do random little things here and there as well. Depends on how we're feeling at the time. And
whatever's available on Arena at the time.
Also true. And then on Fridays, we play whatever video game we happen to be playing at the time. Recently, we have been playing, and this Friday we will be continuing our playthrough of X-Men Legends 2, Rise of Apocalypse. Also be aware, and I'll try to remember to say this here, but we also remind everybody on our streams as well, that next Friday, which I believe is the 22nd, I'm trying to look at the calendar from very far away, but the Friday of the Streets of New Capenna pre-release, we will not be streaming because we will be at the Streets of New Capenna pre-release, as we have been doing for many times prior, so please be aware of that. If you try to show up for that stream, you will be slightly disappointed, but stay tuned for our opening video that we do of the Streets of New Capenna pre-release packs that will be coming out at some point that night, whenever we can film it, edit it, upload it, get it to all of you in your beautiful faces. So just be aware of that. That should be it. And so, yes, on to the full review itself. And again, thank you for any and all support that you're all willing to give. It really helps a lot, and we really appreciate it. So, we meet Perry, a Rox, which I have not heard of Rox in any of the Magic stories that we've reviewed in the history of JaAR. It's been a long time. I've played with Rox cards in Magic, because I've played Magic for too long. But I haven't seen a creature, like a character, who is a Rox. So that was cool. I appreciated that they're back. We also later on find out about raccoon folk as well, which is something that's new to my knowledge. I wrote, New Capenna seems like a very interesting place. You've got demon leaders of houses, and you've got Rox and raccoon folk. Crazy, crazy place, it seems. But Perry is an enforcer. He's a bruiser. He's a big guy. That's what he does for the... I have it written down so that I don't mess this up, but I'm still... Oh, for the brokers, of course. I'm learning all the names of the families. It'll get a lot quicker once I get into the full set itself, but for now it's going to take me a little bit to try to remember them all. But he's an enforcer with the brokers, working under Falco, which is an awesome name for all of us Star Fox fans. We played Star Fox 64 over on our Video Games for All channel. You can go check that out.
That was a while back.
Yes, it was. But that was fun. We did 3 episodes of that. But Falco, a Aven character in that game. Falco, also an Aven character in this story and in this set. So that was kind of interesting that he is the leader of the brokers.
Yeah, because birds suck.
Also a running theme over on Video Games for All. You should definitely go check it out. But Perry is an enforcer in that he seeks out people who have broken contracts. Because something that the brokers do semi-regularly or seemingly regularly is they take care of people who break contracts. So, except for we hear about like a little boy or a boy, not necessarily a little boy, but a boy who broke a contract who Perry doesn't do that with, and so Perry's kind of in hot water. But I found it very interesting because they talk about the brokers having tons of contracts on people, and that they like wipe their memories of the contract so that the people don't remember the contract, but they're still beholden to them so that at some point in the future, if the brokers need them, they can reactivate all these people, and like they're essentially like sleeper agents, seemingly, right? Like you just like hear a code phrase or whatever, and you're like, I will serve the master, you know, that kind of thing. Like that's exactly what I thought of, at least. That's how they described it. Which, again, the contract thing just sounds like Orzhov, right? We've heard of this before on Ravnica. So obviously, different plane, right? It's not exactly the same. But we've heard of that concept before with Orzhov. So I said to myself, okay, I don't know the color trios yet for what families they relate to. Again, I'll get there as we get into the set itself. But I'm assuming the brokers are black and white and then a third color. Nope. They're white. They share that color in common with Orzhov. But then they're blue and green. So they're Bant colors, I believe. I'm very bad at those old names as well, but I try my best. I know like Bant and Grixis, and that's about where I've lost it after that. That's all I know. But I think they're the Bant colors. White, blue, green. So interesting that they do the contracting that Orzhov does, but that it's because it's different slightly. It then necessitates two different colors than black like Orzhov has. I found that quite interesting.
Sorry, my eye is very itchy.
I'm sorry.
I guess some makeup got in it.
I for the very few times that I've had makeup, or I could say like hair gel, and like I sweat and it goes down into my eyes, that's awful, so I apologize. Okay. Let's talk about something very frustrating that I did not enjoy about this story. It gets cleared up as you read on, but like this is the beginning of the story where you're finding out about like the assignment that Perry is being sent on. And it makes very little to no sense. So I wrote it down. I quoted it. I wrote it down because we had to like sit and talk about it. Because I looked at Amy at one point and I'm like, does this make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah, at first we thought there was 2 people, and then we thought there was 3 people. But then, like, later on in the story, it, like, confirmed that there were only 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you, like, even with the confusion here with Zayatora, and again, I'll read it off. But there's confusion here with Zayatora. We literally never hear about her again after this discussion. So, like, that was somewhat irrelevant. But anyway, so let me read off this plan of what Falco wants Perry to go do. Okay. So Falco says, we've banked so much Halo, even Zayatora noticed that the street supply is affected. She's working hard to sniff out where it's going. Got a riveteer in her pocket that stole plans to the newest Halo honeycomb storage before we could fully wipe their memory. Then later on, still Falco.
It sounds more like a weird, bad poem than it does, like, actually explaining what's going on in a story.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's, like, weird. I don't know.
So then later on, still Falco, but, so continuing the quote, but there's some stuff in between. Cross informs me the riveteer's under a gag order, but she has actual parchment plans. She might not be able to speak to anyone about them. She probably doesn't remember why she is on the run until he looks down at the plans. Then she understands what she has and starts running again. Go. Find this contract breaker. Get the plans back. Leave the Riveteer alive, but make them wish they're dead. Dump the contract breaker in front of the Treza so that JaAR gets the message. So, okay. That's the end of the quote. Okay. So, let's talk about this for a bit. Because we've had this discussion many times in past stories. It's a story writing issue that you need to have your pronouns, your titles, and your descriptions matching up within the whole story, but especially within like a paragraph or two, so that people understand who you're talking about, especially towards the beginning of a story when you're introducing characters. So early on in the story, in this section, the Riveteer that they mention is Jolene. We find out her name later. But here we don't know that her name is Jolene, so they refer to her as the Riveteer. The confusing thing is, they also refer to her as the contract breaker.
Yeah, but they don't explain that.
They don't ever say the Riveteer is the contract breaker. Never say that. At all. Also, maybe at the time that this story came out, it made a little bit more sense because JaAR's card hadn't been revealed. JaAR is the colors of the Riveteers. You can look up her card, it's been spoiled. She is the tricolor of the Riveteers. So, to me, it seemed that she was a Riveteer. Maybe she's not. Maybe I'm wrong. But if that's the case, then why does she need a Riveteer in her pocket? She works for the Riveteers. She's the same 3 colors as the Riveteers. So why does she need a Riveteer in her pocket? That didn't make sense. But also, let me see. I was talking to Amy about this. We've banged so much Halo, even JaAR noticed that the street supply is unaffected. Does that mean that JaAR doesn't keep track of that stuff? Does it mean that JaAR is dumb and they didn't assume that she would figure it out? Like, what is that referencing? You have some type of a history with JaAR that we're not privy to here. Yeah. You just bring her up and start, like, either shit-talking her or talking truth about her. But either way, we have no idea.
Right.
Because we don't know who she is to you in any capacity.
Right.
You're just, like, talking like old chums who fully understand, and the rest of us are like, is this an inside joke? Like, can we be in on this too? Is that cool? The story's written for us. So yeah, she's working hard to sniff out where it's going. Got a Riveteer in her pocket that stole plans to the newest Halo Honeycomb storage before we could fully wipe their memory. Okay, so now that we've read the full story, it kind of makes sense because they, I guess, wipe contract holders with of the information of their contract, right? So she stole the plans before we could fully wipe her memory. So does that mean that the plans being stolen was not part of the contract? Is the contract what JaAR has with the Riveteer? Because JaAR, again, is the same color as the Riveteer, so is JaAR working for the brokers and working with the Riveteer to get this information? But also...
I don't know.
But also, Cross informs me the Riveteer is under a gag order. Okay, from her fellow Riveteers? From JaAR, if JaAR is not one of the fellow Riveteers? From the contract? Like, is that, it got that far into the contract that there's a gag order, so she magically can't talk to anyone? Because it says she might not be able to speak to anyone about them. She probably doesn't remember why she's on the run until, and again, this is very likely just a typo, but I read it correctly before. She might not be able to speak to anyone about them. She probably doesn't remember why she's on the run until he looks down at the plans. Then she understands what she has and starts running again. So you just omitted the S, and spell check didn't catch it because he is still a word. But anyone reading that who is actually reading it to edit it, like to understand what's going on, that makes no sense. Who's the he? That's a pronoun that's not used anywhere. When they talk about the Riveteer earlier, I think, yes. When they talk about the Riveteer earlier, they use a they pronoun. Because I guess Falco is not aware of the Riveteer's gender. Again, we find out later it's Jolene, but Falco doesn't know that, right? Falco only has information on JaAR. So Falco says, in relation to JaAR, JaAR's got a Riveteer in her pocket that stole plans to the newest Halo Honeycomb storage before we could fully wipe their memory. So the pronoun being used is they. But then Cross informs me the Riveteer is under a gag order. But she has actual parchment plans. So now, a paragraph later, where in between they did not mention her gender so that they could clarify it, now she is a she, but she has actual parchment plans. She might not be able to speak to anyone about them. She probably doesn't remember why she's on the run until he looks down at the plans.
Right.
So Amy and I are sitting there like, is the he Cross? Thank you.
I thought it was Cross.
Which would have, I guess, made sense.
Like if you're running from someone with a piece of paper in your hand. And you're running, and then all of a sudden you're like, why am I running from this person again? And then they look at the paper in your hand, then you run.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, like, the way this is worded is so fucking confusing.
It's
man.
awful. And, so then it says, go. Find this contract breaker. So there's a title, or a description. Contract breaker, right? Go. Find this contract breaker. Get the plans back. Leave the Riveteer alive. Okay, different title, Riveteer. So contract breaker, Riveteer. But make them wish they were dead. Dump the contract breaker in front of the Treza so that Zayatora gets the message. So
I think it was just a way of them referring to that person without having to put a name or say a pronoun over and over and over again. Or having to say, like, decide on whether it's going to be contract breaker or Riveteer.
Yeah.
And just keep repeating it over and over again. But it's super confusing because it really just makes you think that there's more than one person that they're referencing when they're not.
No. Yeah, because it's like, leave the Riveteer alive, make them wish they were dead. But then it says, dump the contract breaker in front of the Treza so that Zayatora gets the message. That could mean a dead body. So you're leaving the Riveteer alive, but you're killing the contract breaker?
Right.
Like, that's what it sounded like to me. Like, take care of the problem, right? This is a mob story. So, take care of the problem. They broke a contract they're not supposed to. Make them pay. Make them swim with the fishes. Well, you don't make them swim with the fishes, you leave the horse head in the bed, right? You leave the body of the Riveteer or of the contract breaker of whoever the hell you're talking about in front of where Zayatora is going to find them to say, like, by the way, we don't put up with contract breakers. But you're calling them by two different titles in two different sentences, and we don't know anything about them. It's like they're having this conversation like it makes perfect sense to them, and meanwhile we're sitting here going, again, can we understand? Yeah. Can you help us out? Because, again, the story's written for us. It's not an actual video of an actual thing that's going on, so that they're talking in code that we're not going to understand because they know what's going on. Like, no, it's a story. Help us get it.
Right.
That's the whole point. Like, by the time the story goes on, like, later on, we were like, okay, so Jolene is the Riveteer and also the contract breaker.
Right.
So they were just referring to the same person both times, but could not have done it more confusingly.
Right.
So like I said, and we'll talk more, there's more to review here, but so like I said, the idea of the story is cool, the execution is piss poor.
Right.
Like, how does this make any sense? I was so confused and annoyed. Like, it took us a while to go through and like...
we really went through, and then we ultimately, like, still kind of found out the answer when we kept on reading.
Yeah.
Which is also maybe another reason why they did it that way, because they were like, well, if people get confused with this part, it'll explain it later on.
Yeah, it's just that, like, again, I've talked about this in the past. If the characters are confused by something, then it makes sense that we too will be confused by it, so that when the character figures it out, we will also figure it out. But the point is, they are talking about it like it makes perfect sense to them, right? Perry's not confused by any of it.
No.
So we, who are following along with Perry, who fully understands what's going on, have no idea what the hell is going on. And that makes no sense, because Perry is not going to figure it out later. We come to figure it out later because we are able to put the pieces together ourselves, which is
annoying.
And again, is something that I doubt was their intention.
Right.
There. If it was, I guess mission accomplished, but also it sucks, maybe don't do that ever again. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Because people who aren't going to sit here and do a 45-minute video about it aren't going to sit there and take 45 minutes to translate the work.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
So don't write it that way.
Yeah, at best, they'll read past that part and go, oh, that doesn't make sense, whatever. And keep going and then be like, oh, okay, I got it later. And at worst, they're going to read through and go, I have no idea what the hell's going on.
This is too confusing. I've got better things to do with my time.
Yeah. And that's probably not what you want with your story that you want people to read and enjoy. Just saying. Anyway, then they start talking about, now this is something that you brought up with regard to the confusion that we just had, but I'll bring it into the next topic as well. It feels like they're talking a lot about these underground areas, right? They talk about girders, like the city is on girders suspended over land that the people used to walk on. Vivian, in the last story that we talked about on Friday, talked about how the land is like desolate and destroyed and there's like something wrong with it, which again, as typical, a green planeswalker would absolutely be the one to tell us about that, right? She should be in tune with the land, but this whole place is made out of metal, and even any plants that exist are like, or anything nature-wise that exists, right? She talked about seeing a waterfall that was being made out of metal. Like, it wasn't there was no water involved, but it looked like a waterfall made out of metal.
It was dyed a deep blue.
That's Pokemon for you.
Check out our Pokemon series.
We just started Amy's first playthrough of Pokemon Sapphire over on Video Games for All, so check that out. But yes, it just...
Ironically, that's not where the water was dyed a deep blue, was it?
It is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was silver.
It's just later on because we don't have Surf yet this early on in the game, obviously.
So if we had picked like Ruby,
no,
would it have been like Rivers of Blood?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, you messed up. You picked Sapphire. You screwed up.
Oh god. No, this will be Rivers of Blood when they start the war that they're clearly starting.
Yeah. So they're talking about this underground. We heard about it a bit last week, and I wrote the quote, "The foundry on which New Capenna sits, which breathes for the city." So we're hearing a lot about the underground. Now, something that we've talked about a lot in the past, so I'll briefly go over it. The Planeswalker's Guide should be out already.
Yes.
It should. Last week, or last time we did this story, it didn't matter, right? Episode 1 of the main story, it didn't matter. We fully understood it. Now, doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Nope.
So, but this is stuff that would easily be cleared up by a Planeswalker's Guide.
Yeah.
So, I don't understand what your, like, I don't have a concept of what your Undercity is, what it looks like, how much of it there is, because they talk about climbing down a ladder at one point, and then like an hour later they're still climbing. What? Like, does that mean that there's a different area that they climbed down a ladder, walked a while, and found another ladder and climbed more an hour later? Or they climbed down a ladder for an hour? There's a big difference there, and I'd like to know what it is.
Is the Undercity in the center of the Earth? Is the Undercity like a bunker or something? Like?
Yeah. So like, I would like to understand how your plane is structured. That would be kind of cool, right? So that I could understand when I'm reading a story like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense that they'd be climbing down for an hour because those girders are thousands of feet in the air. I don't know that. The girders could be 20 feet up. They could be 20,000 feet up. I have no concept because I haven't been able to read anything about how the plane is structured.
Right.
Give us the Planeswalker's Guide before you give us the stories. It hasn't come out. I mean, we're doing We're doing these reviews far enough after the stories have come out. We're trying our best, we're sorry. But we're doing these reviews after the stories have come out, after people have given their opinions and stuff, and yet still, to my knowledge, right, I haven't gone in-depth searching for it, but I feel like I would have seen it.
Right.
The Planeswalker's Guide is nowhere to be found. So, why is that not a thing?
Especially on the story tab.
Thank you. I was going to get there as well, yes. Why is the Planeswalker's Guide not a thing early enough so that when I read this story, I have a context for where they are and how they got there, as opposed to a smattering of it, which it's not the fault of the author here for not fully explaining the underground, because that's not their job. The underground should be something that we understand so that when someone goes there, we can be like, okay, I have a base foundational knowledge of the underground.
Right.
So now that we're here, cool. Just talk about traversing it quickly, not a problem whatsoever. But if I don't understand the underground, then when you go there, it's going to make no sense to me. Like it doesn't currently. So, and yes, like Amy said, and like we've mentioned many times, put it in your story tab as well. When you did the Kamigawa stories, you had a manga tab, a main story tab, a side story tab, and a saga story tab. It's not that hard to put a Planeswalker's Guide tab and have that be its own thing. The manga had its own tab and was one clickable link. So do the same thing for the Planeswalker's Guide and keep it under your feature section as well, if that's really what you want to do. I don't care, but put it there so that people who want to read the stories can understand what your plane is about as well. It might not be narrative, but it doesn't matter. It helps clarify the information about the plane for everyone. Put it in your story tab. Please, for the love of God. I feel better. Anyway, I don't understand the underground. We'll find out more about it when we read the Planeswalker's Guide. Moving on. Jolene. So this is where when we actually find out about Jolene, Cross explains about her and knows about her enough, which, if Cross knows who she is, I guess I didn't even realize this, but now I'm realizing it. If Cross knows who she is, and Falco says, Cross informs me the Riveteer is under a gag order, you could have told him her goddamn name, so that there wouldn't be all this confusion.
Yeah.
Anyway, Cross later on knows who Jolene is and explains it to Perry. Okay, cool, awesome. We find out that Jolene is actually under Obscura magic. And that it kind of, like Perry, or, God, I was going to say rocks. I have all their names here, I promise. Really? I don't have all their names here? What the hell is his name? 3, 2, 1. It is Cross.
Right.
Sorry. I can't do it. It's so many names. I didn't write Cross's name at the top. That's annoying. Okay, anyway. Cross knows, or kind of comes to the realization that there's Obscura magic going on and casts like a de-spell kind of a thing. And it all fizzles, and Jolene's like, oh my god, what's going on? I didn't know, I promised. So like, it seems like Jolene breaking her contract was only done because of the Obscuras.
Yeah.
Or the Obscura family. So now, because the Obscura have obscured, it's very original, but because the Obscura have obscured Jolene's mind,
sometimes names mean something, and sometimes it's very self-explanatory.
So the Obscura obscured her mind, and she broke her contract. As you referenced earlier, they come to the realization, they being Cross and Perry, because I remembered Cross. I wasn't trying to remember it when I looked up at the sky like that, don't worry. Cross and Perry come to the realization that if they complete the task that Falco asked of them, and actually drop Jolene off in front of Zayatora to send her a message, it's going to start a war between at least the Riveteers and the Brokers.
That sounds awful.
If not also the Obscura. And that's the point of what Cross and Perry talk about, is that, hey, we shouldn't care, I think Cross says, we shouldn't care so much about the Riveteers, right? The Riveteers were brought into this under false pretenses. We should be worried about the Obscura because look at what they just did. And so Perry goes back to Falco, tail between his legs, so to speak, and is like, look, we can't do what you asked, even though I'm in hot water and I need to complete this job for you. We can't do it. And Falco references the fact that Perry is a good guy and didn't go after the boy, who was also a contract breaker,
right,
despite the fact that, according to Falco, all contract breakers need to be made to pay because, and he had this big speech, society shuts down without our contracts being followed, and they won't have meaning, and there will be no structure to society, and the societal construct will collapse without, you know, contracts being
without
honored.
me murdering people who disobey me.
And then references, I know there's a war coming. And for this war, we need a lot of different things. We've been stockpiling Halo for all these things. And we've been doing that in preparation for this war.
Yeah, I loved that. It was like all this bullshit that you're listing right now as preparations for the war is just the shit that is causing the war. You stockpiling the Halo, you, like, everything that they listed there. It was like, okay, these are all the causes of the war to come.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. I wrote that down for you. That's great.
The
so
causes.
No. Yeah. No, preparations.
Yeah. It's the war's not his fault.
Yeah.
I swear.
He's just getting ready for it. You know, he's got to protect what's his. Meanwhile, before the war, he's just stealing from a ton of people who now want to kill him in like some type of a war-like scenario. Anyway, so there's that.
You know, but then his kid and the kid of the rival gang are gonna fall in love. And one of them's gonna die.
God, check out the new West Side Story. It was so goddamn good.
Yeah, it was really good.
Holy crap. Not sponsored, but goddamn.
No, but seriously, if you didn't see it, you need to.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus. Like I said, not
Of course.
sponsored, but we were in West Side Story when we were in high school, so it was we love that show in general, but this one was quite good. Okay, anyway. Okay, so let's talk about Perry, because at the end of this story, Falco says the line that I guess we're supposed to be happy about, where Falco's like, we need a lot of things for this upcoming war, right? We're preparing for all these things. We need, you know, we need to make sure that all of the contracts are being honored. We need someone with a conscience. And that means Perry, because Perry is the person who didn't want to just, like you said, kill this kid or wipe this kid's memory or put him in servitude or whatever it was that was the consequence for breaking a contract as a child that he presumably was forced into because...
Definitely murder.
Because, hey, in at least this world, right, go check out our Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series over on Video Games for All as well, where I, an actual attorney, and Amy, my wife, go along together and do a blind playthrough of that game. But yes, so speaking as an actual attorney, I can tell you, children don't enter into contracts for a reason, because they can't actually consent to that contract. They can't understand the importance of signing your name to a contract and keeping to that contract and blah, blah, blah. So, like, Perry is doing the good thing here, right? There's not necessarily, or obviously there's not, a law against doing that. So...
Well, I mean, there are exceptions to that. Like, children that are 14 or older, at least in New York State, can work, right? So they can get working papers, but it's really just like a card. And then, you know, they're signing all the paperwork that coincides with whatever the job is that they're taking, right? And they're expected to follow all of those things, you know? So, I mean, there's some ways around that a little bit still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. I mean, again, sorry, not I guess. That's absolutely correct. You're right. Yes, there are exceptions. But what I thought was interesting was, right, we already had the idea of a big bruiser enforcer, right? And that big bruiser enforcer, he's actually also a master tactician. That's so outside of the realm of what you would think.
But he's also a conscience.
But thank you for making my point for me. Yes, that's fine.
I was making fun of it.
Well, again,
not your point, but just of the story.
Right, but again, that's my point, is that, like, okay, so he's a bruiser / enforcer who's, like, strong and beefy and a musclehead, right? So the trope is that he would be a dumb jock, right? A big dumb idiot. And yet, he is also a master tactician. And they say in the story, you wouldn't expect him to be a master tactician. You wouldn't expect him to move that quickly, right? But yes, then you have to also add in, but he also has a conscience. It's like, okay, sure, he's a lot of things. Got it. He's a complex person.
And it's a good thing he's a lot of things, because he'd be dead already if he wasn't.
And thank you for mentioning it when we were reading, because I probably wouldn't have written this down, but it needed to be written down because it's very dumb. At one point towards the beginning of the story, they reference a broken pocket watch that he keeps in his pocket. From the old boxing days. That's all they say.
Right.
There's no significance to it whatsoever. It's from the old boxing days. He carries it around and it's broken. How did it get broken? Who gave it to him? What does it symbolize to him? I don't know. Nobody bothered to say anything about it. But it was important enough that the last line of the story is that he takes that hat that he got from that boy and he puts it in his pocket right next to that pocket watch that's still there. Because it matters, just not to us. because
it matters to him in his heart. And that's all we need to know.
Yep. Because again, as long as the characters
we wouldn't want to violate his privacy by knowing the actual, like, reason for why he has these things that are supposed to be important.
As we learned with our big discussion of the plan earlier, as long as the characters in the story understand it, it doesn't matter if we, the readers, do. Because it's not about us, and we need to figure that out and step off.
Right. It's about them, and we should care about them. We totally should care about them. Because they have stuff...
They're real.
Yeah, they're real, and they have stuff that's important to them, like broken pocket watches.
What is it?
It's none of our business why that stuff's important, but it is.
Yeah, promise. It's very rude of you to ask. Oh, that's really good.
No.
You got me. Holy shit. Okay, anyway. Oh my god. Yeah, I can't. So like I said, the idea of the story was cool. I just think it was very poorly executed.
Yeah, it's just weird. I mean, maybe they're gonna explain that in the next story. That's why it's like at the very end. I don't know.
Unfortunately, because I think it's a fine idea. Every time you have mentioned that, it has not occurred.
Yeah.
Ever.
No, that's correct. I know. Yay me!
Yeah. Sorry.
It's just being like, you know, anytime we actually want there to be like fulfillment of, you know, an open-ended anything, there just isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I think that's less yay me and more yay wizards for like not doing it.
Well, like I said, right? Like I was about to say, the pocket watch thing. Like there's the idea of like leaving it up to the audience's imagination, but that's so open-ended. Like there's nothing.
You're not supposed to do that with like random trinkets.
No.
That belong to a particular character.
Yeah, like, okay, so the boy's hat is going in that pocket as well, which is a memento from a good deed that he did. A good deed. I mean, the boy got taken in by an orphanage, had his memory wiped. Is that good? That's like, there's like a big moral question there that is not just, well, whatever, he's probably fine, right? And
I'm
Perry...
gonna come to check on him, but that's a lie.
Yeah, and Perry's like, I'll keep this hat forever, I'll remember him. It's like, he won't remember you or anything else that's happened in his life, so... whatever, I guess? That's it. That's the end of this episode. I can't... There's... It's very weird and confusing. And
I don't really have anything to say more either.
Nope.
I think... Yeah, I mean, it's... I will agree that I think it's quite ironic that the conscience is the one who is taking this child to get his memory erased and to then live in an orphanage where he no longer has a family or any kind of stabilizing anything that helps him get through his life.
But this was the compromise. This is, right, like you said, this is what the conscience does. Right. This was the compromise that Falco allowed him to come to.
Right.
And again, it's supposed to be a good thing, I suppose.
Right.
We don't know. Again, maybe, and actually I'm not fully convinced on this, but I'll say it anyway. Maybe the Planeswalker's Guide talks about what happens to kids whose memories are wiped, and maybe there's a specific place that they go or whatever. Again, that's a very weak argument. But because we don't have a Planeswalkers guide, we don't know. There are a lot of things about this brand new plane that we don't understand because we're getting it in bits and pieces that, again, as long as the characters understand, it's fine. Don't worry about it, everybody. You don't get to know, and you should be happy about it.
Right.
So, if you have actual ideas of any of the things that we didn't understand...
Well, I mean, some of those things are things I probably would rather not know about.
Fair.
And, like, I don't want to know about children, like, being taken to orphanages and having their memories erased and just being left there.
Yeah.
And not getting checked on later.
Yeah.
I don't want to know about
I'll
that.
be back tomorrow. He lied. Like, okay.
Thankies. You suck.
Yeah. It's like, don't worry, I'll be back tomorrow. It's like, ugh, gross. So yes, if you have any ideas about any of the things that we didn't understand, and if you know where we can learn this information that we didn't understand, let us know in the comment section down below.
We can learn it in the streets
Of New Capenna. If you have any other thoughts, questions, comments, disagreements, agreements, whatever, that's what the comments are for. And joining us in these discussions, especially, and still I think, still being able to say, look, the idea was cool, execution was bad, all of that is super important, keeping the conversation going, and it's a really great way for all of you to join us as we show off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
We'll be back later on in the week to discuss the second episode of the main story, because they did main story, side story, main story, side story, so we're doing the same thing. Thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. We would love, as we said, to see you on our live streams, over on Video Games for All, over on Gluten Free for All as well. Don't forget to subscribe.
There are no live streams there.
No, there are no live streams on Video Games for All either, but our live streams are here. Check out Video Games for All and Gluten Free for All in the comments or the description below.
Right.
I really appreciate it. Thank you all so very much. And for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.